Welcome to the practice of Ashtanga Yoga. I'm David Swenson. What you're about to view is the original Advanced A and Advanced B series of Ashtanga Yoga. It is presented in a non-instructional format. It is meant as a historic and aesthetic documentation of this original series. It is artistically filmed on the island of Maui in beautiful settings which we've found to enhance the beauty of the practice itself. We hope that you will enjoy viewing this as much as we have producing it. Thank you very much. So David, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you first came across Ashtanga Yoga?
Okay. I was in India in 1971 studying yoga in Pondicherry. And then in the spring of '72, I met Manju, Pattabhi Jois's son, and Basaraju, his friend, and saw them do a demonstration of first series. I realized this is what I came to India looking for and wanted to learn it. He said he had learned from his father in Mysore, and so I set my mind to go up to Mysore and learn the yoga. And I spent all of my time for the next 12 years either going to Mysore and learning with Pattabhi Jois or participating in his trips to America learning the yoga. I brought him to Encinitas in the winter of 1974 and spring of '75, and that's when David started.
So my first exposure was I left Texas in 1973 or early '74. No, it was late '73. And I was finishing high school out there, and my friend Paul Dunaway brought me to a yoga class. And it was at Bob Mormon's karate school. It was a cold morning, and I remember it clearly. We walked up these steps to this center on the second floor, opened the door, and inside there were about 30 people moving through what I didn't know was vinyasa, but they were flowing through this movement, and it seemed that the walls were breathing. There was such a powerful breath. It was like, and the room was cold. It wasn't heated. I remember steam coming from people's body when they were in downward dog. And David was walking around assisting people, and Paul introduced us, and David took me through the first beginning of it, through the sun salutations. And I could barely finish the 5 of each sun salutation. My arms were tired, and David said, okay, now you take rest and come tomorrow. And as I was lying there, I felt like what David was saying, this is something special. I had been doing yoga before. My brother Doug was my first teacher, and I had been doing a type of hatha yoga, but this new experience with David was so intense that I became hungry for it and wanted more and more. And David just kept giving me more and more. And if I recall, David then brought me to Hawaii to take some of his classes for him in 1970, what was that, 1976? And then you went back to India, yeah?
Yep.
And have been doing it ever since. So then we've got Lucy and Helena. Actually, I remember meeting Helena,
That's where Helena
at
started
Front
in
Street in
Lahaina.
Lahaina,
1977.
1977.
Yeah, I'd been doing yoga for about 3 or 4 years before that.
Uh-huh.
And I ended up on Maui and ended up at the yoga house, and it was a kind of almost a greenhouse covered with plastic that everybody was doing yoga. And I stood outside that room for about a week watching, not sure what to think. And David was just getting ready to go to India, and you were just taking over the classes. And then so I had to make a month commitment, so I did. I dove in, and I got hooked. That was it. And so that was 20 years ago. Still at it.
I'm still on Maui.
It continues, yeah.
Great. And then Lucy learned from
I learned from Brad Ramsey, although I started in '85 at a 4-week workshop that Guruji was doing on the Big Island. And I had known people who were doing Ashtanga, but I felt like I didn't have the time to dedicate myself to it until Travis Joyce came to the Big Island, and I remember I went to his class, did it for 4 weeks, and after that I took 4 weeks off. I just was like, I don't know, in a state I had never been before, but I knew this was something that was just drawing me to it. And after the 4 weeks of doing it, I took 4 weeks off, and since then I've been doing it. It's been 12 years, and made me feel that it was healing me emotionally, physically, and it just felt very right.
And Robert, if I recall, one of my first remembrances of Robert is my brother and I were doing a demonstration in the middle of a park in Houston.
Yeah, in Memorial Park, and then Doug took me off. I met you. Didn't meet you. I met Doug.
Yeah.
And Doug took me off into a little meadow, and we had these 4 legal-size sheets Xeroxed of all the poses, and we stayed out there for about 3 or 3.5 hours. And he started showing me the different poses, and I knew the poses because I'd been doing yoga, but I hadn't seen the vinyasas. And so I took a bunch of notes, and then Doug disappeared off to wherever he did. And I'd play around with these things, and every once in a while Doug would come back, and I'd learn a little more. But I mostly worked with the first series for a really long time. And then I guess in the last few years, I started getting a little more into it, and I think the work that you're doing with the videos, that really inspired me, because there's something about doing a set practice that's challenging, that somehow brings out the best in you, because some days you're feeling strong, some days you're not feeling that strong, and you have to just look for resources inside of yourself to get through whatever it is, and sometimes you have to pass on certain things. And so I think it's been really good in that sense.
Mm. What I'm curious to hear is sort of why, after so many years, people keep practicing, and what particularly it is. Obviously, there's something that keeps people doing this. And if David, what keeps you practicing?
I practice out of fascination. I'm curious to see what will happen to me if I practice yoga for 50 years or whatever. I first heard about yogis in India who got older and wiser and kept their strength. Everybody I knew in my neighborhood got older and sicker and senile. And I was looking for something better. So when I heard of that, I went to India in 1971 like a detective, looking for yoga. I wanted the best, most classical form. And when I found this, I knew this was what I looked for, and I've been practicing ever since.
Uh-huh. How about you, Helena?
It's been a relationship for me, and it's just something that I have, that I embrace, and it's part of me, and I do it on a regular basis, and it changes. It's a process. It's gone through a lot of changes, and it's got its ups, it's got its downs, it's got its plateaus. But it's just something that I carry with me.
I'd have to say the same thing. Maybe we'll all end up with the same sort of answer, but the real reason I keep practicing is when I don't practice, I notice my life is much more difficult. And I find that I have no control over the obstacles that may be presented in a day, but the yoga helps me to deal more freely with my reactions to the obstacles I might confront. And it seems like the asanas are an avenue for that. That it's not necessarily becoming proficient or the act of being able to put my legs behind my head doesn't matter so much, but it's the place in my mind that I go when I'm practicing that keeps me involved in it. It puts me in touch with an inner world that's beyond the physical body, and it seems strange because there's so many asanas, but ultimately the more I do, the less importance the asanas have in the internal experience and my reality that I'm not the body, that there's something more subtle that's connected with the universe around me is what keeps me intrigued.
I think for me, after having kids and doing for other people, I felt like I needed to have a little time for myself. And not only the asanas, but the breathing that you do for 2 hours seems to steady me in the rest of my day. And holding my locks, it seems to, no matter what I have to deal with other people or my family or children or work, I feel that those 2 hours of yoga kind of set my day up and make me feel calmer and better able to handle whatever else is going to come up during the day.
I would agree. Same kind of answer. Just if you're having a difficult day or you're having some challenges, we all have challenges in our life, and they usually will come at a convenient time. And it's really wonderful to go in and take some time and just do your practice and focus your mind, and somehow you come out of that with a clearer vision, a perspective about what's really important in life. And there are difficulties, just like there are difficulties in a given practice, in a given pose, and so on. There are going to be difficulties in your life, and they're short-lived, and you just get through them. And I find I use some of the same internal resources always that I developed in my practice. It's somehow, if you wake up in the morning and you feel stiff and you go ahead and you do something, it puts you in a mode of being action-oriented about anything that happens in your life, rather than just kind of giving into things or hoping things will change. I feel like I want to do something rather than just think about it.
I'm curious also, you're a physicist,
That's
right?
correct.
And does yoga relate to that? Like your views of physics, is it affected by your yoga practice or vice versa?
Oh yeah, absolutely. There were a lot of questions that came up with physics, things that physics can't answer. There's a lot of philosophy taking fundamentals of physics and moving into just a philosophic view of the universe just from physics. And it's very interesting that if you look at kind of the perspective of yoga and the perspective of physics, they're very close together.
Yeah,
They're very, very close together. And one of the things, without getting too detailed about it, one of the things that I thought was very interesting is there's this one calculation that you can do in quantum mechanics that has to do with how long a proton lives. It's a certain classic way of looking at this kind of thing. And you do this calculation, and then you look in the ancient scriptures when they talk about how long the universe lives, and the numbers are very close. So it's been very interesting to see some of the greatest nuclear physicists in the world, or some of the greatest physicists in the world, for example, Yukawa, when he discovered the meson, he was in meditation at the time. And somehow there's a real close link in the way that physicists think and the way that yogis think. There's a real childlike character, and that I really love.
There's one other aspect that I think all of us have experienced, and there's a certain joy and there's a humor that really attracted me to this system of yoga. When I first came, David was always very funny in class and kept it very light, and it was pleasurable. And Pattabhi Jois, the first year he came, his "oh, bad man, oh, bad lady," but they were terms of endearment, and his fun. And I'm just wondering if any of you have any sort of little stories of something humorous or intriguing within the yoga or in your experience in all these years.
What comes to mind is I've just always tried to keep it pleasant and fun, and that's what I tell other people. If they're not having fun, they're doing it wrong. And the other thing I'd say while I get a chance is that after this many years, I've realized what's important in yoga is what's invisible, meaning the deep breathing and the Mula Bandha. What you can see is not very important. All the important stuff's the invisible. So keep that in mind and enjoy it.
So I think that all of us here would be in agreement with David's last statement that ultimately Ashtanga Yoga is an internal practice, something beyond the asanas, that when you get deeper into the practice, there's something very subtle that connects with an unseen world. And I'd also just like to say thank you to my friends and other yogis here. It's been an honor and a pleasure to practice, and thank you all for participating in this project. And with that, we'd also like to say to all of you that we hope that you enjoy this, our humble attempts to portray something that is very dear and special to us. Namaste.
Surya Namaskara A, the sun salutation. Surya means the sun. Namaste is a greeting of two souls. Surya Namaskara B. In the practice of Surya Namaskara exists the foundation and indeed the essence of Ashtanga Yoga. The marriage of breath and movement creates a balance of the internal and the external, the gross with the subtle, as well as the linking of the body, mind, and spirit. This union is yoga. Vishvamitrasana. Vishvamitra was a great sage who was a member of the warrior class of ancient India and the king of Kanyakubja. Vashishtasana. This asana takes its name after another sage, Vashishta, who was an author of Vedic hymns. Kashyapasana, named after another sage, who was the son of Marichi and the father of Surya. Chakorasana. Chakora is a mythical bird which feeds on moonbeams. Skandasana, named after Skanda, the son of Shiva and Parvati. Bhairavasana, one of Shiva's 8 characteristics, which means formidable. Durvasana, named after an ancient sage. In yoga, there is no competition. There will always be someone that is stronger, more flexible, or more attractive. Through regular yoga practice, one learns non-attachment and finds the deeper reality of our true nature beyond the body.